I am here with Cecily Strong. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to finally get to talk with you.
I know it really is a thrill. As Lauren Roseman may or may not have told you, I've asked like every single day since I started this podcast.
Well, that's so nice. Now I feel like I better not blow it.
No, it's okay.
I think we have a lot of mutual friends too. So I've already had I've heard good things and think good things of you.
Oh, good. Yes, when I was on Las Culturistas, we talked about how I'm a fan.
And I mean, you can't go wrong with Las Culturistas.
You cannot.
That's my Bible. So
that's your Bible. It is mine as well. It is so we do share religion as well, I guess. So I want to talk a lot about Janine, Pirro, but before we get to it, I wanted to sort of ask about two other characters to sort of set the stage and get a sense of the sort of different ways you approach a Weekend Update character. So recently, Colin Jost was on Seth Meyers, and I don't know if you saw, but they were fawning over the first time you did the girl you wished you hadn't started a conversation with.
They were so nice. I almost cried. It was so sweet.
For those who haven't watched, they were just sort of talking about how amazing it was that in your first time on Weekend Update, so this was, I think, is like between your second and third episodes when they're doing the Weekend Update Thursdays.
Yeah, it was one of those Thursdays.
So it was in 2012, and as Colin and Seth described it, your ability to sort of go out on live TV and able to be so comfortable and intentional was like a pitcher who threw a perfect game in their first professional start. So can you talk about both sort of working on it with Colin and sort of the first time performing it on Weekend Update and what that was like on your end that was able to impress them so much?
It was really fun. Colin and I wrote that early on, just kind of making fun of myself, explaining some ideas that I could do and being like, well, that one says a lot about society. and then also what happened at the same time was Jay Farrow was yelling. He was like working out something sketch wise in the hallway, but he kept yelling the N-word. And then I went, oh, can I say the N-word in mine? Like, you know, obviously as a joke. I hope that's obvious. That was a joke. And then I remembered like listening to some straight male friends who had these like exchanges with girls in a bar or a party where they thought this girl was cute or something. And then like something inexplicably racist would sort of come out of her mouth. And they'd be like, what? Where did that even come from? And so that was kind of part of it too. It was one of those that's like so easy to write that you wonder if you're like getting away with something. But then you learn like, oh, simple's good in a lot of ways. And then it kind of just became also like a lot of people that I saw online. Mm-hmm. I think I was telling this story before. There was a girl on Facebook. This was later on, but it was Obama when he won his second term. She said, wow, everybody is so happy right now. And that makes me so sad. It was just an insane thing to say. So it was just all of that. And then I think I was so like, I don't even remember being there my first year. I think I was just in shock the whole time. But I'd done a lot of live shows and theater, comedy and sketch comedy, improv. So being in front of an audience isn't necessarily, I don't think I was like nervous enough yet because I didn't know the deal. And if you think of it as just performing in front of that one audience, it's a lot less scary.
Yeah, and I guess maybe it was so early on that you didn't realize how big of a deal was that it was, I guess, like your third show or whatever to have this.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't gone through like my various cycles of self-hatred and implosion and mental breakdowns. I was a virgin to all of that.
To contrast what it looks like when you're creating a character based on a real person to one out of sort of thin air, can you talk about the sort of conception and evolution in creating Kathy Ann?
Sure. Well, even that was kind of based on, I like the idea that everybody is a woman that exists somewhere. And I say woman because I mainly play women. But like, so when I was 22, I worked at Greenblatt's Deli and I sold wine there. And then I smoked cigarettes. I don't anymore, so I can say it. but I smoked outside on my breaks, and there was this woman who would always come up and start yelling, and I would always be like, "Oh God, don't make eye contact." Like, just let her yell, just not to me. And I heard her at one point say, "The cop said my brother got a DUI, said he's blowing his own bad breath back in his face," or something like that. It's just so many good lines. And that's kind of where she started. And then there's just always a lady that's talking a lot in every bar and diner and alley.
Do you store that voice in your head and then wait until a moment when you're like, what's a character I have? Like, where do these people live in your mind?
I don't know. It's certainly not like, I wish it were as easy as like what are they called? Outlook spreadsheet or something. But there's something that's like, I watch a lot of bad reality TV. I mean, it's good to me. It's probably bad. No one else would love it as much as I do. But that's where, I watch a lot of prison shows, and there's just something about like, if you're missing teeth or don't have teeth, that's part of it.
Yeah.
That's in there. But I do like to play around with my voice a lot, just because I think, in real life, people put on voices too, that aren't trying to be funny or perform. And so, like, even if there's like one line in a sketch, I'll feel really good if I come away from the table and James will be like, "Well, now I wanted to see 5 minutes of whoever that woman was."
And that's James Anderson for those listening, who you write a lot with on SNL.
My darling dear, yes.
So the first time you do Janine, which I did not remember, but it was in March 2015. It was a sketch about Robert Durst being interviewed as part of an improv show. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do, actually.
At that point, it's a sort of different impression. Do you remember that? Do you remember if that put her on your radar?
Yes. I had no idea who she was. And I think I remember asking the writers, like, what do you want me to do? I don't really know how to play her. I don't know who she is. And so that's why I just sort of stood with, in a judge kind of pose. And that was like as far as it got. And it wasn't until Brian Tucker, a couple years ago, we actually tried to do a whole sketch of the Pirro show. And we were watching all of her like man on the street stuff, because Brian Tucker was obsessed with her first. And she's so wacky. She goes, "What?" with her like man on the street. And I had no idea. I didn't know this side of our dear Jeanine. So we wrote it where she was like, had a seatbelt to keep her in her seat, and she had her wine, but like enough people didn't know her yet. So it was a long time to really get her on the show. Enough bad had to happen in the world where we all knew who she was.
When Brian first showed her to you sort of again through this new lens, like when you're sort of reintroduced to like an old friend, what was it that attracted you to her?
I think because it was like, there's something too about it not having to fall under the scope of being like a purely political impression, because that's can get so tiresome on our show. It's important, but it's also like, I just wanted to go full on clown and just be really silly. And like someone going, "What?" is already like a silly clowny thing. And then I said, well, I'm going to fly off the chair. And then I hadn't really done a lot of physical comedy on the show. So I took like 20 minutes and was very serious and upset with everyone for not. I was like, I need my 20 minutes, guys. I need to practice my falling off the chair. But I got about 10 minutes to practice it, and I felt comfortable enough to throw myself.
Just to sort of get the time. So this is essentially building up to the Weekend Update. But sort of before you guys decided to do a Weekend Update, was there sort of, did you feel like there was something missing in what you were doing on the show? Like, was there a sort of hole in the things that you were able to do that Janine was able to fill?
I think so. I mean, that's a really great observation that I'm going to steal. But I think it's like we go through phases of that, and you never want to be pigeonholed. And I want to be able to try at least more things. And I hadn't really done a lot of big clowny physical things. And it's like I play a lot of, especially during the political seasons, like I'm going to play a lot of reporters, which is great. I love being a straight man. Like Phil Hartman's one of my heroes, such a funny straight man. But it was really nice to just act out and throw myself, and then it's sort of like that became a new fun thing for me, especially last year with just kind of doing bigger, sillier, kind of looser things physically.
You mentioned the Phil Hartman thing. One of the things that I had noticed is that like you had done, I think, a little bit of also like what Bill Hader did, which was like you like narrate a lot of commercials, or you like play host. Was that an intentional thing? Like, Bill talks about it where he's like, was very deliberate of like, I'm just going to be around and then eventually I'll break out. Was it as intentional for you, or is it just, it felt like you can do the voices necessary for those roles?
No, I mean, I don't think I was like gunning to be the female voiceover. It just kind of worked out that way. But then I do like it because it gets me off of a lot of pre-tapes if I'm a voiceover. And I'm a real brat about those, especially now that I feel like I'm 87 years old. I'm just like, I'm not getting up at 5 a.m. to drive to somewhere in New Jersey.
That I had noticed that it did feel like you do less, like you do more live sketches, and I was wondering if that was just from a live comedy background, but almost everyone has a live comedy background. It's just that like you don't feel like having to shoot essentially an entire short film in like 12 hours.
And some are like, really cool to be a part of, but it's kind of at this point, like if it doesn't have to be me, I'd rather save all of the tiny, I've got like a jar of beans and that's my energy for the show. And so I like hold on to that jar for dear life. And so I'm like, I have to be able to read and watch out for machinery and move and keep my eyes open at Saturday at midnight.
So to dig further into Janine, so what is the process of sort of creating an impression? Sort of like what is like the work of before you even start writing the words of like whatever it is that gets you from a vague idea of how she's funny to like actually sort of forming your idea of who this character is?
I'm not like I've never been considered myself really an impressionist. There's been certain ones that are easy, like Sarah Koenig. I listened to so much Serial that it was just like in my body. Mm-hmm. And then I think it helps if you look and already sound a little like someone, or at least have a similar voice. But with her, I think it became clear that's like, this is going to be more about the attitude and just the clowny part of it than like really doing a great impression of Jeanine Pirro. So it's more when we approach them now, I start with like, what's the big thing I can do? I have to at least move laterally. We can't move down. So it's like, Tucker, I think now I'm going to throw up red wine all over Colin.
Yeah.
So it's always like, that's how we approach it now. So very, academically like that.
Yeah. I mean, how, on a sort of technical level, like what I think people are amazed with how people are doing voices. Like how are you literally working on a voice? Are you listening to just her and you're sort of like getting to a point where you're like, well, that's close enough. Let me figure out how to make it funny. Like, are you just listening to tapes of her?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll watch videos and then I'm sure my apartment neighbors realized at some point, like, or just assumed I was insane because I'll spend a lot of like, you get home late and you can't sleep and I'm just up trying to get Sofia Vergara right or Erica Jane and like recording myself to try to find it. Like, where does that sit? How did I do that? Where was I putting that? I don't think I've ever done too much more than like watching videos. I mean, really, you got to be ready by Saturday. You usually have like 2 days. I went in, I got told Saturday morning I was playing John Bolton.
And you're like...
And I was like, oh my God, that's such a Colin Jost thing.
Mm-hmm.
That you walk in and he goes, do you mind playing John Bolton? And then I think like another one I walked in and Kent was like, do you mind being a dog translator for a German Shepherd? So it's a lot of that. But I love that. Keeps it loose too.
Do you like, and sort of how deep does it go? Like in terms of like when you're thinking of the character, are you like would you be able to do like a character breakdown? Like in your head, is there like all these character traits of like, oh, this is how she would do this? Like, or is it instinctual where you sort of like, you just sort of like lock into whatever it is?
I think it's a bit more instinctual. I think if I was too in my head about it, it would be more mechanical and I wouldn't really be able to do it. I think it's just like feeling like, oh, that's her. Oh, yeah, this is this gal. And just like, I like the idea that she's always like a little bit horny and a little drunk and and self-righteous and has no shame.
Yeah. So the first time you do it on Update, so it seems like it was built around, you had the idea for the fall. Sort of how do you then work with Brian to sort of write out a thing? Like, what are your different roles and sort of how does a thing come together?
Oh, sure. Well, he had a lot of jokes, like harder jokes that were really funny. I think his first one that I can remember off the top of my head was Mama's got one volume and it's, 3 Chardonnays deep at a party or something. Mm-hmm. Then I remember we were doing a read with the Update folks and they had a lot of jokes that I think it was like a Lord of the Rings reference or something, very much not my world, but it reminded me of Indiana Jones. Like I found it so funny that she would use Indiana Jones references. And kind of like be on the bad guy's side.
Yeah. Not realizing, like not understanding the parallels of who the bad guys are.
Right. Like you're not going to wake him up this time. Sword step, And then even like the same with Cobra Kai, with Karate Kid. That like became our own little inside joke with her that she loves the bad guys from 80s movies.
With the falling, like, do you read Weekend Update characters at table read, or do they tend to be worked on after?
So it's both. I feel like I'm more successful when I don't do it at the table read because it's really hard. You go through 40 sketches at the table read and then you're asking like people to listen to 6 pages of one character doing jokes. And especially if it's a recurring thing, I don't necessarily like to use that table for those, but I do. I mean, I think it's important. Then we'll still have a table like on Saturday with some of the writers. So you can at least hear it out loud and get some rewrites and joke suggestions before you put it all together to do it in front of an audience.
So you mentioned practicing the big fall that you do in the first one. So what does that practice look like? Do you do one, then like watch the tape back?
No, so I just was like relying on 2 friends who were an Update to watch and see which looked best, whether I have 2 pillows or 1 pillow that I'm flying on. And they were like, oh, 2 pillows for sure. Cause you can really throw yourself then. And then like my shoe flew off during dress and it was so funny. It was completely on accident. And then we were like, well, I was like, I got to keep that somehow. Got to make my shoe fly.
Do you like loosen the shoe? Did you figure out the exact?
I'm pretty sure I did. Yes. I mean, that's like as technical. It's so funny to talk about it. Like I have some method. It's really like I'm just hoping, come on, shoe fly.
Is there anything else you remember from the first performance of her? Did you feel like it was something special or different? At this point, I mean, this is your 7th or 8th season, so like you've done a few, but like did it feel like something really struck a nerve that first time?
It did. It felt different because there's also, it's really a thing that we always are struggling with on our show and trying to figure out better is how to keep things from being so static. Because, it's usually like there's a 2 shot and a 3 shot and you're behind a desk. So it's kind of hard to get a lot of movement or any choreography like that. Not that that's choreography. So it was kind of the first time that I really got to go for it like that in a big way. And I think similarly, I had an amazing time doing that Love at First Sight sketch with Chance on the wires for a similar reason, where it's like, this is just, I wish we could figure out more ways to do things like that on the show.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, when I think especially like this compared to Girl at the Party, like it's like Girl at the Party, it's really successful with a lot of like small things, like small facial expressions and stuff. And I think you're particularly good at that. And then you also are able to do the big stuff like the Chance sketch or the sketch where Bill Hader's on a motorized wheelchair and you're riding him. How I sort of have 2 related thoughts, which are sort of, how do you think about your comedy in terms of like playing big and playing small, and also like the desire to sort of play something real and also play something sort of heightened?
Yeah. Wow. That's A lot. You're much smarter than I am, especially right now in quarantine. I think it's like, with Girl at a Party, I have so much fun with like the malapropisms, and that's very Colin and I writing together. Porn Stars was similar, where it was like, what words can we warp just enough? And I love language and I love being able to play like that. But certainly it's not the same with a bigger character or sitting on someone's lap in a motorized wheelchair. So it's kind of, I love having both and being able, being on a show where I get to do both. That's really such a dream. But I think it's definitely like you have to, I worked my way up to like the bigger, silly stuff. I think you have to like earn that with an audience too. Especially if you're not just a natural like Chris Farley or Will Ferrell or someone who can come swinging out the gates being so good at that.
In general, after the first one or even the first week, did you get any feedback from Lorne that you remember?
Well, so right after that one, I remember we were on the floor. I was going to do something else, and it was after Pirro. And Lorne, it was like right as this big piece of furniture or wall was coming. So Lorne came up to say something nice to me and then had to squeeze into the wall as this big thing flew by. And he was saying like, that was really good how you flung yourself or something like that.
So you do it again in the season finale in 2018.
Judge Janine, I hate to ask this, but have you been drinking?
Oh, Colin, please. I haven't been drinking. I currently am drinking. I have vowed to enjoy a drink every time President Trump ignores a congressional subpoena. And let me tell you, Mama is a lizard.
All right, well, despite Trump's stonewalling, it's still likely that Robert Mueller will testify before Congress.
What? Colin, look, that's a terrible idea. The report is done. Senor Mueller has spoken, and he said, no hablo collusion, man.
In general, how do you decide you want to do it again, you should do it again? Like, how is that, the mechanics of that work? We're like, oh, I think it's about time. It's been a couple months. Or is it a thing in the news?
I think it's, got to be sort of a combination. I don't like to just feel like a factory of, we have to do this week. We don't have anything. I like it to feel like there's been some time, so it'll be welcome. And it feels now it's like special to me. So I want to keep it feeling special. And she had just been in the news, but actually, so when we did her in the finale, they wanted it earlier for the Mother's Day show. But I remember reading that she lost her mother that year. And I was just like, I'm not going to do her on Mother's Day. That just felt cruel. Yeah. And so we did it the next week. But so I do care about her.
Yeah, I sees that. So that one is, how does the idea for that one, which was the second one is the spit take one?
Yeah, so that was like, it's like vaudeville, it's like slapsticky, just.
Yeah.
And then it's like, there's all these nerdy guys who I love and girls who write for Update, and they love getting to be a part of that too, and thinking of like, oh, and then a drink should come from underneath and Che will hand you a drink. And Tucker says like, and you say, thank you, Keenan. So it was like all hands on deck being like old-fashioned clowns with each other.
So she's paired with Jost from the beginning. Is how does that decision made, right? Because it's like Kathy Ann's with Che the entire time. How do you decide whose decision is it? Is it just the nature of like, oh, we did one with Che? Like how are the decisions made of like who should be? Because like Jost makes sense for it, but like how did that land on it?
That's such an interesting thing, and I actually think about that a lot on the show. It's like, when you originally write it, you want to keep it pretty open because you don't know what's going to be cut or kept on Update. And usually they'll want to give them both a feature. But there are some, like Girl at a Party became Che right away. Mm-hmm. That relationship was funny. And Che and Kathy Ann, who are just a natural pair of lovebirds.
Yeah.
But usually I try to keep it open and find something that'll be fun with either of them. But it's fun. Like either way, I'm trying to make whichever one laugh. You know, I really like both of them and like writing with them and like what they write. So it's like a pretty joyful thing to do a feature with them.
I guess, so then after it's whoever it is with first, you might then adapt, right? Because I feel like you're not gonna, I just can't imagine you throw a drink or spit on Shay, right?
No, I would never. I wouldn't dare. And it's kind of like you wouldn't want to see it as much as you want to see it to Colin. His book's called Punchable Face, you know?
Yeah.
He knows. And Colin loves it. I mean, he like giggles excitedly when I say, "Can I throw red wine up on you?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great."
So that is the next one, which was in December 2019, which is the Eddie Murphy episode.
Oh, please, Colin, Devin Nunes is gonna give them hell. And that's Nunes. It's Portuguese. So no enye comprende say. That portly Portuguese coffee is gonna blow the lid on this whole impeachment hoax. Oh, mama.
Yeah. Well, actually, Devin Nunes has been accused of meeting with Russian operatives.
What?
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
sorry, Colin. I've got a bit of a winter tickle in my throat.
winter tickle?
So winter
threw up a gallon of wine.
Well, then I made some room for a little aperitif.
So how did red wine throwing up? Obviously, like, okay, you did a pratfall, then you're doing the spit take. So then where do you get to throwing up wine?
So actually, I do think I remember a little bit of how that came to be. Kent Sublette and James, I think, had written this sketch that we never did. It never worked. But it was like, we wrote it originally, I think, for the JLD show, Julie Louis-Dreyfus. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of like these hip, high-powered New York executive women at a PR firm. And they're always like out at an event. And they come in and they're just so hungover. But they're like, guys, can we focus? And then they just keep throwing up. And so I kept loving the idea of throwing up. And so it was sort of like, I can do a Pirro, or what if I'm like a woman giving holiday party tips and I just keep throwing up? And then it was like, well, let's just marry the two.
Yeah. What was it like performing the throwing? Because there's the way SNL does throwing up, which is like, it's just the SNL throw up, which is like, There's the tubes and it just sort of like comes. What is the system? Who's in charge of the liquid? How do you orchestrate that?
Yeah, we have this FX guy named Richie, and everybody loves doing his voice because he's such like a New York guy, Richie. And he's like, hey, so what? It's going to blow up. So I don't know how big it's going to be. Every time everyone I do sounds like Marge Simpson. That's my Pete impression too. But so he runs it, and I was so excited to get to like, this is an institution, the SNL barf machine, you know, and I haven't done it yet. But it was, the tube he gave me was so big. I have pretty small hands for the size of my body, especially. I'm like a little freak. But this tube is so big, and you have to sort of wrap your hand around. But it looked like I was holding like a roll of paper towel or something. It's so big. And then afterwards, there was a lot of discussion. They were like, Lorne's really concerned with the audience seeing it. So we really need a smaller tube. And it was funny how like technical and serious they were. And it's like, if we don't get this down, it's going to be cut. So then we had to like change the tube. And I just put it in my wrist now. So I actually did it a different way than the SNL barf normally goes. So it came from my wrist instead of my hand. And I tried to use that hand so no one would know it was coming. But I'm still like, I have a giant tube on my back. Yeah. And I kind of am working with Richie to say, because it takes a second for the barf to get up to the tube to come out. So you're still going like, you know, before like, is it coming? So it's a lot of that. And just trying to get the timing right with Richie.
In general, in these or in Weekend Update, are you able to improvise more than you are, or in general, or more than you would in sort of a more traditional sketch?
Oh, absolutely. I think I improvise every single update, but it certainly feels like the environment for it. Like I wouldn't do that in any sketch. I don't think it's necessarily like the right thing to do on our show because of how many cameras and people are relying on you saying some line that's on a card, you know? But with those two, especially, and in that situation where there's just one camera on you, you're a lot freer to kind of throw something in if you think of it. Like, I remember the first time I really felt that was a Kathy Ann, where I said something about like, and Donald Trump needs to get off the internet too or something. And then I went, I mean it. I know he's watching or something like that, which was saying that right then. It's just like it's not like you're improvising a lot, but you're more free to kind of have fun with it and play a little bit.
So you then do Janine in the season finale, and which was also the third From Home edition in May this year.
I'm sorry, are you having trouble with the Zoom?
You're young. Tell me, is your computer supposed to say, please stop screaming?
I don't think so. No. So, I'm sorry, you're hoping we can just open up and take our chances? We lost you again.
That's the plan, Kimosabi!
Oh my God, where are you?
Never mind, Ainsley. This economy is a bullet train and it doesn't stop for the weak. So buy a ticket or get the hell out of the way. Toot toot!
Oh my God. Janine, what are you drinking now?
Oh, it's called a pina cloraxa. It's pineapple juice, coconut milk, and a half cup of bleach. And not the bottom shelf kind that they use on truck stop toilets. The good stuff.
Generally, what was the From Home experience like for you?
So it's crazy. I mean, it was like the most work I've ever done because I had to learn all these other skills, not well, but you know, that we have experts doing normally at the show. And luckily I had two friends quarantined with me, and my friend Kevin made beautiful props for me. He made that big wine juice box, the White Gal, Merlot, I think it was called. But it was doing my own hair and makeup for the most part, and talking to Tom in wardrobe, who sent me the yellow dress, a couple of those, and I put the bows on just because I thought that yellow dress was so iconic. Her big bow dress.
Yeah.
But and I even did, so I wear these pulls, these face pulls when I do Janine normally. I just wear them incorrectly.
What does that mean? Sorry.
So they just kind of, I wore them, you could see them the most in like the Reality Star sketch I did with Will Ferrell. It kind of gives you like a mini facelift. So I do them to pull my cheeks up, and my lips are a little wider. I don't think anybody even notices, but I go through it. And I did that for the at-home show too. So I did those myself, which was crazy.
How did you decide to do a Janine at home, and then sort of how did the idea evolve for her himself essentially doing it at a home thing? So I missed out really on the first show. I just wasn't I was still not quite emotionally ready to go be silly yet. You know, I wanted to, and I'm happy that I got there. I felt good about it by the second show. And then so for the third, it felt like, it's sad to not be in New York. It's sad to not be with these people. And this is like a little gift to myself too, to do Janine. And then, luckily she had been doing all these crazy things for her own at-home show. She like wrote it for me. Yeah. And then you landed on a drink being thrown. How did that idea come?
I made it so difficult for myself because I also wanted 3 different costumes.
Yeah.
I wanted her to keep cutting out because she had those technical difficulties the first time. And then, I said, this is so sweet because to me, it was like, this is a little bit of magic during this quarantine, where we don't get to like see people or connect with people. And it's the magic of like something going through the 2 screens, which is the coconut drink.
Yeah.
And this thing that's familiar, which is Janine gets him wet, being able to do that in this setting. So it was like much more special to me than probably anyone else.
So I spoke with Adi earlier this summer about this a little bit, but did doing the shows at home make you think about or reconsider your relationship to the sort of live SNL audience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but a Zoom show, it's just difficult anyways. I'm like, I did Fallon last night, and I kept saying, like, I don't know how I went. I feel like there's blank spaces, and then I'm such a anxious person that I'm like, fill the blank space, fill the blank space. So I don't really know. And it's just, it didn't feel like, it felt like we're doing this. It's important what we're doing, and we're still having fun. But there was also like an element of, there was something that was like bittersweet in it all. And you know, I know this isn't the way we normally do it. I'd love to be doing it the way we normally do it. And so I'm doing this like as an homage until I can do that again.
Well, I guess you do a lot of live sketches. I was thinking, because like, you know, 80 mentioned that like,
Right.
as you spend more time in the show, you sort of get a little cynical about the audience. Like they don't know real comedy. Did you have anything like that, a realization or a newfound respect for having those people there?
I don't know that I got a newfound respect for our audience. I mean, bless them, love them.
Yes.
There's some like hardcore fans that are wonderful that are there, but it's more that it's like being around just everybody, the crew even, and doing something live. It's like you can be much more playful. And I don't care about the pre-tapes as much. I mean, some I really, really love, and I'm like, that was great, but it feels like what's so special about our show and this skill that we'll study like as long as a doctor goes to school, and I can never use it anywhere else because no one else will have these like study cams and cue cards. But it's such a like just you know, you're reminded how special it is, our show, what we do.
Yeah.
And it's nice to just like have instant like, oh, you laughed, so that was funny, huh?
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm like, again, I'm just throwing everything at the wall, and I'm just crazier than usual.
Yeah. You've talked about, you know, with characters or in general with your comedy, you want to come from a place of joy is how you've put it. How do you do that while also trying to say whatever you want to say about Janine and her work or her politics? Like, is that a thing that you have to balance? How do you figure out how to be both joyful but also like get whatever the message is you want to get across?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like that's why we do Janine in this clowny kind of way. So it's sort of like I wouldn't find it as fun to think about any of the more horrible things that she's ever said. So I'd rather talk about Cobra Kai and have her doing some flying or something where it's kind of like, it's really simple. I wouldn't call it like intelligent satire, but it's like a fun way of doing it. You know, like this makes sense in my head, the leap. So hopefully it does to you. But I'm always saying, I don't want to talk about Donald Trump with my friend. Like, I don't want to talk about any of the news, but I do love when he does something so ridiculous, bozo on Twitter. Like when he said he met the Prince of Wales, I still laugh about that. And he spelled it like the animal. And like that kind of stuff. I want like more clown. I want to laugh at things like that.
Yeah. Especially SNL, I think, is under this sort of pressure, partly because, as you mentioned with Kathy Ann, he was watching the show, at least at the beginning. He maybe still is. But, like, you know, most people go into, like, sketch comedy because they like to be silly and they like to make people laugh. And then you sort of get on SNL, and it's, like, where politics and satire is focused on. And, like, obviously it is, you want to play a part in it, but sort of how do you think about your work in those terms of, like, how do you sort of, did you have to go through a part where you had to like reconcile, like, well, what do I do? How am I part of this thing? If I'm not going to be like, I'm not doing Trump, I'm not doing that impression.
Yeah.
I mean, you do Melania. Like, how did you figure out how to fit yourself into that part of the mission?
Definitely. I think there's been like moments when I first did Susan Collins, I think it was like the first episode of the Matt Damon one. He did that brilliant Kavanaugh. But it was like, you know, they really had, Susan Collins was kind of the straight man in that scene at that point. And I think the writers just sort of made her like, what have I gotten myself into or something like that. And I was like, we're not going to do her like that because I know the women in my life they're really angry. They're upset. And if it doesn't make sense to go to like not mention the fact that she's complicit in this.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it was like, I never want to go below the belt or be like mean and nasty, but I certainly am like, we're going to get a little digging in some way. And I think it's just figuring out if you can do it in a funny way, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. When I think about how Janine fits into your oeuvre at SNL, and it's like, I think a lot of sketch characters are sort of overconfident, but I think what you do really well is like messiness. You have these sort of messy characters. What do you like about playing messy people?
One time I had an acting teacher tell me I was a tree and not a flower. So maybe it's just easier for me. It's like whenever I can do a Liza impression because we both are trying to do Judy impressions, and we're I'm not smooth like Judy. I'm kind of jazzy like Liza. I think I think that's just because, growing up in the Midwest and my Pilgrim Puritan ancestors, I'm so embarrassed like every day walking down the street, just in general. And so I'm shocked and appalled and delighted by people who aren't, and people who just, those are, like I said, I love reality TV. Anybody who's going to put on a good messy show, a good public freak out is like, it's a full course meal.
One thing that I heard you say that I was really interested in is you mentioned that partly because you're on RuPaul's podcast, so it made sense you put it this way, but you think of all your characters as drag performances.
Yes.
Can you talk about that, what that means, and in what way sort of is Janine a drag performance for you?
Well, I think like when you think of at least like comedy queens, you're being kind of an over the top female character. And, I'm always wearing like big fake tits, fake nails. Like that's always been in my closet. So it's like I am dressing in full drag a lot of the time to play even just like, but I'm just the housewife in this. But she's got big old titties and wears white flared pants. And so it's still it's still kind of a drag performance in that way. And that's what makes it like funny and worthwhile, and sort of that like old school, there's an old fashioned, I'm saying old fashioned, but even in drag, like a vaudevillian slapsticky kind of thing.
How did drag start to influence? Like, was it intentional? Had you noticed? What was your relationship to drag where you were able to put two and two together?
Right. I mean, I don't think I was on purpose, like trying to emulate drag queens, but I'd always loved drag performances, or even like when I was doing a show at the Bailiwick Theater where I did a lot of shows as a kid, there was one show called Bitches that I loved that was like an all male cast, but they were all playing high school cheerleaders. And it was just, it's that kind of big, broad comedy that's it's so funny. And there's a lot of like, when I want to play a big character like that, I think that's where that crossover is. But also with drag, I got even more into it. It was my way of like burying my head in a nice rainbow sand after the election. It was like, I just want to be around things that feel good and celebrate people I care about and lift people and like make the world more beautiful. And so I kind of really threw myself into watching a lot more drag at that point, just because it was like, there's too much sad and this makes me feel really good. And it's just a feel good art form.
Speaking of drag, so RuPaul hosted this season.
What? You're going to hear the story of this woman that you've all decided is too pathetic to be treated with dignity.
Whoa. Because every night, this woman goes home to nothing and nothing.
Empty apartment, empty bed, empty head. And now you predators want to empty her purse as well.
She went to Sephora on her lunch break to get eyelashes put on top of her own eyelashes, hoping beyond all reason that maybe someone would become a true friend. She has none.
Oh, my God.
Can you talk about working on the designing women's sketch with him?
Can I stop talking about it? Honestly, like one of the top moments of my life. And it was also my birthday. When I didn't know Ru was hosting, it was something that I almost was like, I think it's just not going to happen, because we tried for so long. And I was leaving the doctor's office. I had some weird stomach thing. I probably had coronavirus. I was scared I was dying because I just lost my cousin. So I was like, of course I'm next, just in that weird, sad space. And then I'm leaving the doctor's office and I looked at my phone and I had all these texts saying RuPaul was hosting and it was on my birthday. And it was like, I tear up talking about it because it was such like a hug from the universe or something, it was like the nicest thing that could happen. And then that show was so much fun. The after party was the craziest after party I've ever seen. I don't think SNL's ever had anything like that. I met Shea Coulee. It was Shea's birthday too.
Oh my God.
It was like my friends were dancing. It was like there's Bowen on a table and just like everyone was dancing. It was wild. It was just such an amazing night all in all. And then to get to say, I got to do, to be in like an homage to one of my favorite scenes that I even when I was like feeling frustrated with certain people during the years, I would call them Marjories. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, I get to do that scene finally. And I get to do it with the best scene partner in the entire world. So I was giddy and still am and still like, that's fun that I'll just watch some days and it makes me smile.
So you co-wrote that with James Anderson, who you've written so much with, as we've mentioned. And did Kent co-write that one as well?
Yes. Kent usually is writing with us, even if has to do more head writer duties.
So in general, why did you click so much with James? And in general, what has it meant to have him write for you? He's been a classic SNL writer from before you were there, but like you've become this sort of surrogate for, their perspective. What has that meant for you and sort of where do you think that stems from?
I think I would never have lasted this long if not for James and Kent. And they're both, but James especially is just so brilliant. And we just clicked immediately right off the bat, like found the same things funny. I have a wig drawer in my house because James has a wig drawer and we make each other laugh all day. And sometimes it can be a really stressful environment, especially considering it's a sketch show. And why are we so dramatic about it? But James and I, it's like, he's just become one of like my best friends in the world. And I think we find the same things funny and we care about things. I care about him. And I've been really lucky to be able to write with him. And I hope that like whatever I do beyond this, I would love to make sure James and Kent are a part of it.
Yeah. A lot of the sketches you've done together have focused on, acute pieces of sort of gay or queer culture beyond the sort of designing women sketch. The one I always think of is the Erica Jane sketch, which famously made Larry David break harder than I think any host has ever. Where does your interest or love of these subjects or your sort of familiarity of it come from?
I think this sounds like so simple and cliche, so there's more, but it's like just having a theater background to start. And then I always say, like, I was sort of raised in that theater in Chicago and my parents were getting divorced and I was always a bit of an alien at school and not sure how to fit in. And I think a lot of my friends who happen to be gay men now, we're just kind of similar. We haven't had similar experiences, but we've felt certain things in life where you don't quite fit in and you're drawn to, I watched Strangers with Candy over my landline phone with my friend Graham in high school. So we're just, I think there's like a sensibility and an appreciation for similar things. And I love it. It's like so many of my friends are gay men and I love all my friends, not because they're gay. I hate them for being gay, but you love the sinner. Yeah. Just kidding. But I'm always like, when I write stuff, I'm always thinking like, oh my God, I can't wait till you guys see this, until so-and-so sees this. And so it's, it's things that make me laugh and that would make them, and I'm just so excited to like write for my friends who I think are hilarious.
Yeah. Though the thing that jumps out to me is like, you're talking about the Designing Women sketch on Seth Meyers and he remarks that like you'd never mention it's a Designing Women parody, and you go, well, it's for a very specific audience. You know, in general, you've talked about the sort of Venn diagram of what you find funny and what the audience finds funny, and finding things in the middle. Like for you and for your sensibility, is Janine Pirro like, oh, this is a way to sort of like package what my sensibility to a thing that sort of can reach a more general SNL audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and because so much of what I watch is like some dumb, theater fail online, or like a goat hitting a reporter in the vagina or something. It's like, so you can't, if you tell Lorne you're doing an impression of that, then he's like, well, do people know what it is? So you just have to kind of just change everything a little bit and just call it a character. And that's how you get something on the show.
Yeah. I can't imagine anyone sort of feels entitled to an Emmy nomination or expects it at any point, but I imagine you must feel something sort of when other cast members get nominated. Did you feel any sort of way at about over the years when sort of other people were nominated, just generally?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I wish I could be like, I'm made of steel and I'm so confident that nothing can shake me. But it's, it definitely felt like, I think a couple summers ago, and I'm always, obviously this should go without saying, I really truly love the people I work with, and like I could sob about how much I love them right now. And so anything good happening to them is wonderful. And like, I love that. But it certainly made me, just in like darker moments where I let like my own depression or self-hatred or anxiety get in the way. It's like, am I not likable? At one point I felt like like being singled out as the one they didn't like as much or something. And I definitely feel so taken care of and loved by everyone on the show, and people are so nice about it. So even this year I was like, oh God, it's the worst, because people that have great intentions who are being really nice always text like, I'm really sorry. You should have been. And it's always like, God, no, it's okay. I'm okay. Don't feel bad for me. Then I wonder like if I should be feeling bad for me. So it's usually a day like that. And I absolutely was not expecting, and still, I'm grateful. It was a really fun day getting to talk to all these people who were so, so nice. And if anything, that's the win. It was really nice. And I was like, I bet you Kate and Adie are probably like, oh, thank God we can talk about it in front of her.
When I talked to Brian a little bit before interviewing you, and we had talked before Kenan got nominated, and we had talked about it sort of that way of like, here is this all-time great sketch performers, like who we as people who know sketch know what he's doing. We're talking about as Kenan, and how can he not be recognized? And eventually I wrote a piece being like, dear Emmy voters, this is what Kenan is doing, so and now he's sort of been nominated every year since. And he was saying he felt the same way about you, which is like, there's this person, and it's like, I think of you sort of as a sketch performer. But so in general, to be nominated, what does it mean to you? Or does it shade how you think about your time on SNL any differently?
I think so, for sure. It's nice. There's no way around that. Yeah. And I think like seeing someone like Kenan go that long was like, this is not going to be like an internal gauge for me, obviously, whether I get a nomination for something or not, because really like, Kenan used to send texts every Sunday and say, that was really, what a great show for you. And here's something I read. You just so freaking nice. Yeah. And it's, having like the respect of people that I think are amazingly talented and good at this. It's like, that's my gauge. Mm-hmm. And feels like this is the best icing on a cake. And how great that I don't have to go dress up and go to sit there. It's a real have a camera on me when they say someone else's name.
Do you have I have no sense. Do you have any sense if there's a reason why this year compared to any other?
Well, to be totally honest, I lost my cousin Owen to glioblastoma at the start of the year. And that's been such a big part of this whole year for me. And I wasn't able to talk about it for a long time. And then with coronavirus kind of stopping everything, I was finally able to really like grieve him and think about him. And I've sort of been using him as like a navigator for this time and like trying to find magic. And he told my uncle at one point, he was like, this was the best year of my life. And that was like living with brain cancer and doing chemo and polio therapies. And it was like, if he can do that, what a great role model to like be open to nice things happening, even if you're feeling so unsure and everything's kind of scary. And so in my head, it was like, that felt like a little gift from him. And I think even just doing the article in Vulture, so many people read it. And it's kind of, sometimes the Emmys, it's like, it's really people going, we liked this other thing that you did.
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, I wonder if that, I wouldn't be surprised if that article and then therefore Owen is a little bit a part of it. And so I'm taking it that way a little bit anyway. And I'm choosing to because it's a nice way to think about it.
You know, we're talking a lot about Weekend Update, which you were actually the anchor of for a season and a half early in your show. It's like I forget about it. It feels like a completely different era. And
just
Update,
one season.
Yeah, I know. Update is, you know, a great but sort of different opportunity. And it seemed fairly mutual when you sort of didn't return as an anchor and Che was slotted in. But considering what you've done on the show in the 6 seasons since, how do you look back on that decision to go back to sort of like re-assume as a sort of regular cast member?
I mean, I think at this point, I'm like, how lucky to have gotten to do that too.
Yeah.
You know, and it was really, you know, I think Amy Poehler's so incredible and Seth is so incredible. So it was, I feel so lucky that I got to do that with him. And then I'm so glad Che and Colin are doing it and they've turned it into something like that I just wouldn't have been able to do, you know, and I thought I'm much better at this other thing. I really appreciate the update jokes and being an anchor, but I think I'm much better and I want to be a clown more, you know? Yeah. I want to be a clown.
You know, when I prepare to interview as someone on SNL, I'm always struck by how every interviewer asks whoever they're talking to when they're planning on leaving the show, no matter how long they've been on SNL. It's like your first year. It's like, what's your plan next? It is uncanny. So I promise not to ask you when you're leaving, but I will ask a sort of adjacent question, which is, what do you hope it will feel like when you are ready to leave?
I don't know. I mean, this sort of all made it tricky, and I think like it should be kind of tricky. I think of it like I want it to be kind of like an Irish goodbye, you know, because otherwise it's just too overwhelming. It's like I wouldn't know how to say goodbye to this place. Like I choke up even saying that. I'm such a nerd.
It's okay.
But so it's kind of like I would want to, like, I like being able to pull back from the show a little bit and kind of still get to do some things, but letting the new people who are brilliant get more space and shine, and then to kind of leave that way, but to know that I always can go back home, you know? And I'm even like, I'm buying a house in New York now, and I haven't bought anything in New York, but I've really fallen in love with Hudson Valley, especially what it's offered me, you know, just this kind of peace and contentment, and SNL in that way. And so it's like, I'm going to make an honest woman out of New York.
So that sound means it's time for our final segment, which is the laughing round. It's like a lightning round, but because this is comedy, it's a laughing round. So it's like shorter questions, hopefully lighter questions, I promise.
Oh my God, that's me, not you. Try having like a honestly, light conversation with me. We're both crying and talking about.
I promise you, it is equally me.
Okay, good.
And you could pass on these because they're short and whatever. Do you have a favorite joke, like a street joke?
Oh, I like, so here's one. How many mice does it take to screw in a light bulb?
How many?
2, but how do you get them in there? And then I really like the 2 whales at the bar joke. Do you know that one?
No.
So 2 whales are sitting at a bar, and one turns to the other and he goes, ooh, ooh. the other one goes, man, you are drunk. You
Great.
can really take your time with that one, too, if you want.
What is your favorite accent to do, and can you do it?
So I got very into South African for a while. I'm not very good at it, but I really like it. So it's sort of, I have to get into it, but it's like I have to hit my consonants a bit harder. But I watched this like documentary about South Africa, and I just remember this kid being like, split the log, you pussy, split the log. Just hit it, just fuck it. A lot of people here are spitting and farting and kicking. They are really racist. So that's my hilarious jaunt into South Africa. And then I like, I don't know, I like most accents. Oh, I love a lot of, like, I love English accents and Essex, all of that. I love watching Love Island for that reason.
Can you do one of your favorites? Now that you brought it up, the listeners are just dying to hear one.
Sure. Please. This is my favorite thing to do. So like when I think about The Only Way is Essex, it's all, they're always like, thing is though, when you was out with her, it felt like so aggy towards me that like, I don't even know if I can like trust you again. That's my, I'm also like creating a dramatic
scenario.
Yeah.
Have you done it for a British person and they're like, that's correct? Like, do you, right? Because this was the year that Phoebe Waller-Bridge hosted, right? So did she go
yes.
like, did she go, yes, that's what we sound like, or they
She's
sound like?
An angel. You know, actually, like I was doing a bit of my best try at Liverpool with Idris, and he was very impressed. But I think he was probably also being nice. And I just like, if I watch enough Love Island, I'm much better at it than trying to like come into it. I have to just really watch hours and hours, which I do.
Yeah.
For my craft.
Yeah, it's
I make
for work.
the sacrifice. Yeah, I do it for the craft.
Do you have a comedy crush?
Ooh. I think Tim Robinson is so funny. Sam Richardson. I loved working with those guys. I loved them in Chicago. I love Amy. I guess everyone. I mean, I have a billion crushes in general.
Sure.
Anybody who's like a bad guy in a European miniseries, I probably am so horny for.
Is there a character that someone else has done in any era of SNL that you wish you could steal or wish you could do in a world where they never did it? It's only your character and you get to do it and everyone will love it.
I mean, I Sweeney Sisters are great. And like, I mean, and basically like, I mean, I wouldn't want to have been the one to do it. No, I want to just watch them do it. Like Mike Myers and Dana Carvey, everything they did, gold. Mwah.
Yeah, like you don't want to be Wayne. You want Wayne to exist because you get to watch it.
Yeah. And I mean, I had like that movie memorized.
Is there any celebrity that you think you can impersonate either because of energy or you can do the voice, but you look nothing like, so you don't get to do on the show?
Idris Elba. As John Luther.
So wait, did you do that for him, were you saying? Or
sure did. We were at dinner and I was so shy because I'm such a big fan. And Kate was like, have you done it for him? And so I had to do it. But it's a lot of squinting and putting my hand on my face and being like, no. You can't see me, but it looks really good.
Yeah.
And he just said, no, Alice, Zoe, Ian. Just yelling his name. But it's the squint and kind of putting your chin down and looking up, rubbing your lips and your chin. That's my Luther impression.
So as an SNL cast member, you have told the story of how you got cast, I have to imagine, every day for the last 8 years. So I'm going to see how fast you could tell the story.
Oh, God. You've already heard me talk.
Well, it's a test. We'll see how fast you can do it. You can use time jumps and smash cuts. You don't have to, as fast as you can.
Okay.
Starting now. I'll time you. Starting now.
Okay. I did a showcase at I.O. at the beginning of the summer. I didn't do any impressions or solo characters. I didn't come from that world. So I took a workshop and I tried some out. I did the showcase at I.O. I was called to like a speed dating thing where I got to meet Lorne and some producers the next day. Then I was flown to New York for a screen test with other women. Then the next day, I was flown back to New York for that crazy test where they just sit around with you for a couple hours and make sure you're not a lunatic or that you're the right kind of lunatic. Then I waited a couple months and tried to not think about it because nobody gets SNL, so don't let it hurt me. And then I got flown in for another screen test, so I did new characters. And then the next week, I got flown back out with Adie and Tim, and we all had a confusing meeting with Lorne where it turns out we were hired.
Bam. 53 seconds.
Okay. You should have seen me doing a mile run.
Yeah. And last one, is there a sketch that, I mean, there's probably a million, but one that jumps out of you, that a sketch that didn't work, maybe went to just table, maybe went to dress rehearsal, that you tried once or twice that you think is brilliant, that you couldn't get enough audience to laugh at it, that to do on the show, but you'll go to your grave as like, this is the one that got away?
Oh gosh. There's one that we would try a lot at the table. We found so funny, called Book Club, where I just remember Leslie kept reading her Star Wars fan fiction and everyone kept going, that's not the book club book. That one never went. I always thought it was really funny. And then Adie and I tried to do this one based on like the Dallas housewives ladies who show up at her nephew's birthday party. I'm not selling these very well, so.
No, that's great.
It's just dumb, big character-y things. And Vanessa and I once were doing this country music singers who had just been separated. They were joined at the head.
And then they just been separated. And then
yes, but they're still
ensues.
performing their songs. And their songs were like, if the timing ain't right. There was something about creaming in jeans, and I don't remember. They were funny songs too.
That's great. That's it. That's the end of the interview. Thank you so much. That was so great.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad to finally get to talk to you.